The divorce papers hit the table with a satisfying slap as my wife Rachel smiled and said, "We just can't make it work anymore." I'd lost my job, and in her eyes, I was worthless. But there was something she didn't know. For the past 2 years, I'd been secretly building a company that was worth $3.2 million that very day. My name is Michael Torres. I'm 41 years old, and I'd just spent the most humiliating 6 months of my marriage being treated like a failure by the woman who'd promised to love me through better or worse. Apparently, worse had an expiration date. I sat in our kitchen, the same kitchen where we'd planned our future, discussed starting a family, and shared dreams that now felt like elaborate lies, watching Rachel organize divorce paperwork with the efficiency of someone who'd been planning this moment for months. "I think we should keep this simple," she said, not meeting my eyes. "You can take your clothes and personal items. I'll keep the house since I'm the one with stable income now." "Stable income," I repeated quietly. Rachel made $65,000 a year as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized insurance company. Decent money, but not exactly Fortune 500 executive territory. "Michael, let's be realistic," she continued, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "You've been unemployed for 6 months. You spend all day on that computer playing around with some consulting project that barely brings in any money. I need security." What Rachel called playing around was actually Silent Solutions LLC, the digital marketing consultancy I'd incorporated 18 months earlier while still working my corporate job. What she thought was my unemployment hobby was actually a thriving business with 12 recurring clients and monthly revenues that had just crossed the $280,000 mark. But I'd learned long ago that Rachel wasn't interested in my explanations or my plans. She was interested in immediate visible success that she could brag about to her friends. A husband building something from scratch didn't fit that narrative. "I understand," I said, signing the papers she slid across the table. "You need to do what's best for you." She looked almost surprised by my cooperation. "Thank you for being reasonable about this. I know it's hard, but we both know this isn't working." What wasn't working was Rachel's ability to see beyond her own immediate gratification. What wasn't working was her complete lack of faith in the man she'd married. What wasn't working was her decision to jump ship the moment things looked uncertain. But she was about to learn something about assumptions and timing. To understand how we got here, I need to explain how Rachel and I met and what our marriage had really been like beneath the surface. We'd met 5 years earlier at a networking event for young professionals in Denver. I was working as a senior account manager for a large marketing firm, pulling in $85,000 a year plus bonuses. Rachel was climbing the ladder at her insurance company, ambitious and confident about her career trajectory. The attraction was immediate and mutual. Rachel was beautiful, smart, and driven. I was stable, successful, and genuinely interested in building a life with someone who shared my work ethic and ambitions. Our first 2 years together were genuinely happy. We traveled, bought the house, planned for the future. Rachel talked about eventually starting her own marketing consultancy, and I encouraged her, even offering to help with the business planning and startup costs. But something shifted after we got married. Rachel became increasingly focused on appearances and status. She wanted us to drive newer cars, live in a more expensive neighborhood, take more lavish vacations. When I suggested we should build up savings first, she accused me of being too conservative and lacking ambition. The real problem started when I began questioning my corporate job. The marketing firm was stable but ultimately limiting. I was making other people wealthy while my own creative ideas were dismissed or stolen by senior partners. I started talking about maybe starting my own consultancy someday, building something that belonged to us. Rachel's response was immediate and negative. "Why would you leave a good job to chase some fantasy? Do you know how many people would kill for your position?" "It's not a fantasy," I'd tried to explain. "I have clients who've already expressed interest in working with me directly. I could probably match my corporate salary within a year." "Probably isn't good enough, Michael. We have a mortgage. We have responsibilities." That conversation happened repeatedly over the following months. Rachel wanted certainty, immediate results, and visible progress. The idea of me taking a risk, even a calculated one, terrified her because it threatened the lifestyle she'd planned for us. So I stopped talking about it and started planning in secret. Silent Solutions LLC was incorporated on a Tuesday afternoon in November during my lunch break from the marketing firm. I'd spent months researching business structures, tax implications, and licensing requirements. I had a business plan, financial projections, and a list of potential clients I'd been cultivating for over a year. The name was deliberate. Silent, because I was building it without fanfare or family drama. Solutions, because that's what I provided, practical, measurable results for businesses struggling with digital marketing challenges. My first client was a small law firm whose partners I'd met through a friend. They needed help with their online presence and lead generation. The project paid $3,500 and took me 3 weeks of evening and weekend work to complete. Rachel never asked what I was doing during those late nights in my home office. She assumed I was playing video games or browsing social media. Her lack of curiosity about my activities should have been a warning sign, but I was too focused on building something meaningful to pay attention to our growing disconnect. By month 6 of Silent Solutions, I had 4 regular clients and was generating about $8,000 per month in revenue. Not enough to quit my day job, but enough to prove the concept was working. By month 12, I had 8 clients and was bringing in $18,000 monthly. I was working 60-hour weeks between my corporate job and my consultancy, but the growth trajectory was exactly what I'd projected. Rachel knew none of this. She saw a husband who was always working and too tired to do anything fun. When I tried to share my excitement about a new client or successful campaign, her eyes would glaze over. "That's nice, honey," she'd say, already turning back to her phone or television. The breaking point came when my corporate job got eliminated. The marketing firm lost its biggest client and had to cut 30% of its workforce. Despite my seniority and performance record, I was part of the reduction. Rachel's reaction told me everything I needed to know about our marriage. "How could you let this happen?" she'd demanded, as if I'd personally chosen to be laid off. "Let what happen?" "The company lost a major client. It's not personal. You should have seen this coming. You should have been networking, building relationships with other firms. I have been building relationships, just not where you think." But she wasn't listening. She was already catastrophizing about our finances, our mortgage, our future. In her mind, I'd gone from successful husband to unemployed liability in a single day. "We need to cut expenses immediately," she'd announced. "Cancel the gym membership, stop eating out, maybe look into refinancing the house." "Rachel, we're going to be fine. I have a severance package, and I've been working on some consulting projects that could replace my income." "Consulting projects?" "Michael, this isn't the time for your side hobby. You need to find a real job with real benefits." That's when I realized Rachel didn't see me as a partner building something together. She saw me as a provider who'd failed in his primary function. My dreams, my plans, my carefully constructed business, none of it mattered to her if it didn't immediately replace the security of my corporate paycheck. So I stopped trying to explain and started working in earnest. With my corporate job gone, I could finally dedicate full time to Silent Solutions. I raised my rates, took on more complex projects, and started targeting larger clients who needed comprehensive digital marketing strategies rather than just quick fixes. The growth was explosive. Within 3 months of my unemployment, Silent Solutions was generating $35,000 per month. Within 6 months, we'd crossed $55,000 monthly, and I was turning away new business because I couldn't handle the volume. But Rachel saw none of this success. She saw a husband who'd lost his real job and was now spending all day on the computer, doing what looked like busy work. She saw someone who wasn't actively interviewing for corporate positions or networking with hiring managers. "Michael, I found some job openings that might interest you," she'd say, showing me listings for marketing coordinator positions that paid half what I'd been making at my previous job. "Thanks, but I'm actually doing really well with the consulting work." "How well? Are you making enough to cover our expenses?" I could have shown her the bank statements, could have explained that Silent Solutions was now generating more revenue than both our previous salaries combined, Could have shared my plans for expansion, for hiring employees, for building something substantial. But Rachel had already made up her mind about what constituted real work and what constituted playing around on the computer. She'd stopped seeing me as a partner whose judgment she trusted. The final straw came when Rachel started making comments about our future. "I've been thinking about what we want our lives to look like," she'd said over dinner one night. "And I think I need to be with someone who shares my ambitions for financial stability." What does that mean? It means I can't be the only one concerned about building a secure future. I can't be married to someone who thinks he can just wing it with freelance work. I'm not winging anything. I have a business plan, regular clients, growing revenue. Michael, you've been saying that for months. If this consulting thing was really working, wouldn't you have more to show for it by now? That's when I understood that no amount of explanation would change Rachel's perception. She decided I was a failure, and evidence to the contrary would be dismissed as delusion or false hope. The conversation that led to divorce papers happened on a Wednesday evening in March. I'd just signed a $45,000 contract with a regional healthcare chain, the biggest single deal in Silent Solutions history. I was genuinely excited and tried to share the news with Rachel. "That's great, honey," she'd said without looking up from her laptop. "But when are you going to start looking for stable employment?" "Rachel, I just signed a contract worth more than half of what I made annually at my corporate job." "One contract isn't a career, Michael. What happens when it's over? Then I sign more contracts. That's how business works." She'd closed her laptop and looked at me with something approaching pity. "Michael, I love you, but I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend that what you're doing is sustainable or responsible. What I'm doing is building a successful business. What you're doing is avoiding reality, and I can't watch you fail anymore." That night, Rachel slept in the guest room. The next morning, she'd contacted a divorce attorney. The irony was that by the time Rachel served me with divorce papers, Silent Solutions was generating more monthly revenue than our combined previous salaries. I had 16 regular clients, a waiting list for new business, and financial projections showing the company could easily be worth several $1,000,000 within 2 years. But Rachel saw a man who'd been unemployed for 6 months and showed no signs of returning to normal work. The morning she presented the divorce papers, I'd just received confirmation that my business valuation, commissioned for potential expansion planning, had come back at $3.2 million. The timing was almost poetic. "I've made my decision," Rachel had announced, sliding the papers across our kitchen table. "We just can't make it work anymore." I'd signed without argument, knowing that the discovery process would soon reveal exactly what Rachel was walking away from. "I think you're making a mistake," I'd said quietly, "but I respect your choice." "Thank you for being reasonable. Most men would make this ugly." "I'm not most men." Rachel's attorney had recommended a collaborative divorce process, assuming we had minimal assets to divide and no complex financial arrangements to untangle. They were half right. We would avoid a lengthy court battle, but not for the reasons they expected. The first indication that Rachel's assumptions might be wrong came during the mandatory financial disclosure phase. Both parties were required to provide complete documentation of income, assets, debts, and business interests. I submitted everything: corporate tax returns for Silent Solutions, bank statements showing business and personal accounts, client contracts, intellectual property documentation, and the recent business valuation. Rachel's attorney called for an emergency meeting within 48 hours of receiving my disclosure. "Mr. Torres," Patricia Whitman said, reviewing the document spread across her conference table, "there seems to be some confusion about the scope of your business activities." "No confusion," I replied. "Everything's documented exactly as it exists." Rachel sat beside her attorney, looking increasingly pale as the numbers became clear. Monthly business revenue of $65,000. Business bank accounts with balances exceeding $180,000. A formal valuation placing Silent Solutions' worth at $3.2 million. "You told me he was unemployed," Patricia whispered to Rachel. "He is unemployed," Rachel replied weakly. "He doesn't have a job." "Mrs. Torres, Your husband owns a business valued at over $3 million. That's not unemployment. That's entrepreneurship. The meeting lasted 2 hours as Patricia tried to understand how Rachel could be so completely unaware of her husband's financial situation. The answer was simple, but embarrassing. She'd never asked, and I'd stopped volunteering information she clearly didn't want to hear. "Michael," Rachel said as we left the attorney's office, "why didn't you tell me about any of this?" "I tried to tell you, for months. You told me I was avoiding reality and chasing fantasies. But you never showed me the numbers. You never asked to see the numbers. You'd already decided what my business was worth." That evening, Rachel attempted to restart our marriage. "We don't have to go through with the divorce," she said, suddenly interested in hearing about my business plans and future projections. "Rachel, you filed for divorce because you couldn't be married to someone who wasn't financially stable. Now you want to stay married because you've discovered I'm more financially stable than you realized. I made a mistake. I didn't understand what you were building. You didn't understand because you didn't want to understand. You'd rather divorce me than trust me. But now I know better. Now you know the numbers. That's not the same thing." The divorce proceeded as planned, but the terms were very different from what Rachel had initially envisioned. Instead of me walking away with clothes and personal items, we had to negotiate the division of a substantial marital asset. Colorado's equitable distribution laws meant that Rachel was entitled to a portion of Silent Solutions' value, since the business had grown significantly during our marriage. My attorney had prepared for this, documenting that the company's core intellectual property and client relationships were developed using my individual expertise and contacts that predated our marriage. After 3 months of negotiation, Rachel received a settlement of $480,000, her equitable share of the business growth during our marriage, minus credits for my individual contributions and the company's non-marital assets. It was more money than she'd ever seen at once, but it was also a fraction of what she'd walked away from. If she'd stayed married, she would have been a partner in a multi-million-dollar business with unlimited growth potential. Instead, she'd cashed out for a one-time payment. The final paperwork was signed on a Thursday afternoon in September, exactly 1 year after I'd lost my corporate job. Silent Solutions had just crossed $80,000 in monthly revenue and was being courted by 2 larger marketing firms interested in acquisition discussions. "I hope you'll be happy," Rachel said as we left the courthouse. "I'm already happy," I replied. "I have been for months." "Are you going to sell the company?" "Number, I'm going to keep building it. That was always the plan." 6 months later, I hired my first full-time employee, a talented digital strategist who'd been freelancing for various agencies. Sarah was smart, ambitious, and genuinely excited about building something meaningful rather than just collecting a paycheck. The contrast with Rachel was impossible to ignore. Sarah asked detailed questions about our growth strategy, offered insights about potential markets, and volunteered to work late when important projects demanded extra attention. She understood that building a business required patience, faith, and the willingness to see potential rather than just immediate results. When I mentioned this observation to Sarah one evening as we worked on a particularly complex campaign, she laughed. "Some people can only see what already exists," she said. "They can't imagine what could exist with enough work and vision." My ex-wife definitely fell into that category. Her loss is my gain. And honestly, it's probably your gain too. You need a partner who believes in what you're building, not someone who's constantly questioning whether it's worth building. A year after the divorce was finalized, Silent Solutions had grown to 8 employees and was generating over $150,000 monthly. We'd moved into a proper office space, implemented professional HR systems, and were actively discussing expansion into new markets. Rachel had used her settlement money to buy a condo near downtown Denver and was dating a middle manager from her insurance company, someone with a stable corporate job who met her requirements for financial predictability. I heard about her life through mutual friends who seemed perpetually amazed by the transformation in my circumstances. "She has to know she made a huge mistake," my friend Kevin said over drinks one evening. "I don't think she sees it as a mistake," I replied. "She sees it as choosing security over uncertainty. The fact that the uncertainty turned out to be profitable doesn't change her fundamental decision-making process." But $3 million, Michael. She walked away from $3 million. She walked away from the possibility of $3 million. To her, those were completely different things. The vindication I'd expected to feel never really materialized. I wasn't angry at Rachel anymore, just sad that someone I'd loved couldn't see what we could have built together. Her inability to trust my judgment had cost us both the chance to create something remarkable as partners, but it had also freed me to find someone who shared my vision and my willingness to work toward long-term goals rather than immediate gratification. Sarah and I had been dating for 6 months when Silent Solutions received its first acquisition offer, $8.5 million from a national marketing firm that wanted to expand their digital capabilities. We declined, but the offer confirmed what I'd known since the beginning. Building something valuable takes time, faith, and the right partners. "Are you ever tempted to sell?" Sarah asked as we celebrated the milestone at a quiet restaurant near our office. "Not yet," I said. "We're just getting started. In 5 years, this company could be worth 10 times what it is today." "And you're confident we can get there?" "I'm confident we can build something worth having, whether that's 10 million or 50 million or something else entirely. The specific number isn't the point." Sarah smiled and raised her glass. "To building something worth having." As we toasted, I thought about Rachel and the choice she'd made to leave rather than trust. I wondered if she ever thought about what Silent Solutions might have become with her marketing expertise added to our growing capabilities. I wondered if she ever regretted choosing certainty over potential. But mostly, I felt grateful. Grateful that her lack of faith had forced me to build something entirely my own. Grateful that her departure had made space for someone who believed in taking calculated risks for meaningful rewards. Grateful that sometimes the best thing someone can do for your future is to remove themselves from it. The divorce papers that had seemed like an ending turned out to be a beginning, not just for Silent Solutions, but for my understanding of what partnership really means. Real partnership isn't about finding someone who supports your dreams only after they become profitable. It's about finding someone who believes in your vision when it's still just a vision, who trusts your judgment when the outcome is still uncertain, and who's willing to build something together rather than just sharing what's already been built. Rachel taught me what that kind of partnership wasn't. Sarah showed me what it could be. And Silent Solutions continued to grow, one calculated risk at a time, proving that sometimes the best revenge isn't plotting someone's downfall. It's building something so successful that their absence becomes irrelevant. The woman who'd left because she couldn't see my potential had simply cleared the way for people who could. And in the end, that turned out to be the greatest gift she could have given me.